Everyone's talking about Trump's next move on Iran, the bombs, the deadlines, the headlines. But what almost no one is saying out loud is how this could quietly rewrite America's entire place in the world. A former CIA station chief just laid it out, and one line cuts through the noise like a knife. Pay attention to where the confidence cracks, because that's where the real stakes show up. Watch carefully.
Fox News contributor and former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman joins me now. Dan, let's start with what the president said. Are you confident that 2 to 3 weeks is enough time to accomplish what we need to accomplish before we leave, in light of the fact that this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to neuter Iran once and for all?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. Look, our goals have been pretty clear. It's to destroy Iran's defense industrial base, their ballistic missile program, the drone program, their navy, to destroy what's left of the nuclear program, somehow to gain control of the roughly 1,000 pounds of enriched uranium as well. Now we have to add to that dealing with the Strait of Hormuz. But those are all the things I think that the president will need to accomplish before we get out. You're right. Once we end the war, we don't want to have to go back in 6 months or a year. The president alluded to that yesterday. We don't want to have to, as the Israelis like to say, mow the grass and dig up the weeds again. We want to deal with this once and for all.
What does this timeline mean for U.S. troops potentially on the ground in Iran? Because when you hear 2 to 3 weeks, that does not give a lot of time to put our troops in an enemy combatant country and then pull them out.
Yeah, I think, look, that the message to our troops is pretty clear. We've sent the 82nd Airborne Marine Expeditionary Force, the 75th Ranger Detachment. We've got the George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier. We've got a lot of military assets in place. And I think what the administration might be doing is thinking about last strikes that could produce the damage that we want on Iran's defense capabilities, on their security establishment, those targets that matter so much, before we come to a deal that will end this war.
As for the kidnapped journalist, State Department said they warned this individual not to go. This individual went regardless of all of that. Is this a one-off, or is this part of a strategy that Iran is utilizing to influence this war?
Look, we always tell our journalists, American citizens, to avoid war conflicts like this one, and where they're going to be putting themselves at grave risk. I really understand that journalists, that's by their very nature, it's what they do. We know at Fox News how our journalists have done that. Intrepid, brave journalists like Ben Hall. But in this case, what we'll be doing, I'm quite sure, is using our intelligence resources. I've done that at CIA to try to track down and find our journalists, conduct negotiations where and if that's possible, and do everything we can to find this journalist and bring her out safely. But it's extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. Obviously, a lot of the focus now is going to be on this. But before we let you go, big picture, coming out of this war whenever it ends, this administration is not happy with NATO. We asked for help. NATO did not provide it. The president telling The Telegraph he is strongly considering pulling out of NATO. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoing similar sentiments. Listen.
I've been one of the strongest defenders of NATO during my time as a United States Senator because I found great value in it. But when we need their help, not their help, we're not asking them to conduct airstrikes. When we need them to allow us to use their military bases, their answer is no. But I do think, unfortunately, we are going to have to re-examine whether or not this alliance that has served this country well for a while is still serving that purpose, or is it now become a one-way street where America is simply in a position to defend Europe.
Is that where this is headed, Dan? The United States leaving NATO? And if so, what about NATO, if anything, survives?
Look, I hope that's not the case, and we need to stop airing our differences publicly. That only helps our adversaries like Russia, which we're trying to deter Russia. I think what we need is a NATO summit behind the scenes. We need to discuss some of these tensions. Look, the NATO members will argue the United States didn't consult them before our attacks on Iran. And we will argue that NATO members were slow to come to our assistance when asked to do some things to help us in the war, to prosecute this war against Iran. So, look, both sides have issues we need to discuss, but best to do it privately. Let's leave the hyperbole out of this about leaving NATO. I don't think that's in the offing, and of course, Congress would be very much against that, and they passed a law that makes it clear that we won't without their approval. It's a congressional treaty. So, look, hopefully we'll have a summit and solve some of these outstanding differences.
Dan Hoffman.
That was the moment the mask slipped. Not on Trump, not on Iran, but on the entire post-2024 foreign policy machine that's still pretending the old rules apply. Hoffman didn't come on to cheerlead or doom scroll. He came as the guy who's actually run operations in that part of the world, and what he described was a high-wire act. Eliminate Iran's nuclear breakout capability in weeks, not years. Pressure the regime without handing it a unifying martyr moment. Get an American journalist out alive, and somehow keep NATO from fracturing while the Europeans whisper about de-escalation in private. Here's the gut punch nobody's saying on the Sunday shows. This isn't just another Middle East dust-up. This is Trump testing whether the post-Iraq, post-Afghanistan, post-endless war consensus is finally dead. And the former CIA man's careful language told you everything. When he talks about challenges in destroying Iran's defense capabilities, he's not talking about hardware. He's talking about political will in Washington and allied capitals that have spent years learning how to kick the can down the road. Think about the timeline. Trump returns to the White House, and suddenly, the clock on Iran's nuclear program isn't measured in diplomatic quarters. It's measured in weeks. That shift alone should make your stomach tighten, because if you believe the regime is months away from a weapon, as multiple intelligence assessments have warned, then weeks isn't bravado. It's math. But math that comes with a body count if it goes wrong. Hoffman's tone on the kidnapped journalist Shelley Kittleson was even more telling. Hostage recovery isn't a side issue here. It's leverage wrapped in morality. Every dictator from Tehran to Pyongyang watches how America handles its own people. Fail here, and you signal weakness that echoes far beyond one missing reporter. Succeed, and you remind the world that American citizens aren't bargaining chips. Then there's the NATO undercurrent. The call for private discussions among allies is diplomatic speak for the public unity is theater. And the real conversation is happening in back channels because too many European leaders still think they can outsource their security to Washington while lecturing us on restraint. Hoffman knows the game. He's seen allies cheer American action in private and distance themselves in public the moment polls shift. But here's what nobody's asking out loud. What if this strategy actually works? What if Trump forces a deal or forces a collapse faster than the foreign policy priesthood thought possible? The same voices who spent years calling maximum pressure reckless will suddenly pivot to claiming credit for stability. Watch for that flip. It's already being rehearsed in think tank hallways. Critics will say this risks wider war. Supporters will say doing nothing risks a nuclear Iran that changes the balance of power from the Gulf to the Mediterranean for a generation. Both sides have a point, and both are missing the deeper tension. After decades of managed decline disguised as strategic patience, the U.S. is once again acting like it believes its own power matters. That belief itself is disruptive. Hoffman didn't sugarcoat the difficulty. Destroying hardened, dispersed Iranian capabilities isn't a laser show. It requires real risk, real intelligence, real decisions about escalation ladders, and it requires a president willing to own the outcome instead of outsourcing it to endless multilateral talks that have delivered exactly zero nuclear rollbacks. This is why the clip lands differently than the usual cable chatter. It's not performative outrage or scripted talking points. It's a seasoned operator walking the line between realism and resolve. You heard the caution. You also heard the underlying recognition that the alternative, watching Iran cross the threshold while we debate another round of sanctions, is no longer acceptable. The next few weeks will test more than Iranian air defenses. They'll test whether Washington still has the stomach for decisive action, whether our alliances are alliances or just habits, and whether Trump's instinct to move fast is genius or gamble. If the journalist comes home, if the nuclear timeline is broken, if the regime is forced to choose between survival and ideology, history will record this as the moment the post-Obama era in the Middle East actually ended. If it stalls or blows up sideways, the same history will call it another chapter in American overreach. Either way, the old script is finished. Hoffman just read the new one out loud carefully between the lines, and this story is far from over. The next move will tell us everything. We're watching this one closely.